The PC is easily the best way to play games nowadays, in my opinion. Not only do you have a system which is way more powerful than the PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation 5 Pro, but even as we move into the next generation of consoles, almost certainly the PC will remain supreme. But not just that, you have access, of course, to all of the AAA games and the likes of Square and Capcom and Konami, but Sony are porting many of their titles over to the PC, such as God of War Ragnarok and so on, but Microsoft are making it very clear that PC is the way forward for the Xbox division, and therefore, games like Halo and Gears will also see PC releases. To that end, the PC is also becoming a lot easier in terms of accessibility. Back in the day, it used to be a lot more of a painful experience. You had to worry about system configurations and going in and making sure your drivers were up to date. And if you weren't too familiar with all of the terms like, what anti-aliasing did and all of that stuff, you had to worry about making sure that the game would run well on your system. But nowadays, Nvidia or AMD's drivers will do pretty much all of the configuration and hard work for you. All you need to do is load the game and tell it to optimize, and you're good to go.
To that end, CyberPower PC in the UK sent me one of their systems for a showcase.
This is a sponsored video, but they told me just to test the system out how I chose to do so, and well, honestly, it's pretty darn capable. So let's take a look at what the system is, and we can go from there. The system that I was sent is a mid to high range system. It features a 14900K, which is a really powerful processor even now, and it's quite arguable whether it's better to go with a 14900K if you want to go the Intel route anyway, or something like a 285K. I'll leave you guys to argue down in the comments down below. A MSI Z90 Tomahawk, which is pretty nice as a board, DDR5 memory, 32GB, and also perhaps the star of the show, a Samsung 990 Pro drive, that's 2TB, it's a Gen 4 and also an RTX 5070.
Now what's really nice about CyberPower PC UK is there's no limitations in terms of having a system that you end up with and then everything is proprietary and you can't make any tweaks or changes.
Basically, they'll use very standardized components, so if in several months' time you decide, I want to switch out the cooler, or I want to switch out the graphics card, or I want to change X or Y, you can do that really easily, and also the entire case and everything else is just really easy to work on.
The system's internals have excellent cable management, and the layout and position of the fans and other components is well thought out, with the front and side of the case comprised of a large glass panel, which can be opened up to provide access to the machine. The vented side panel features 3 fans behind it, pulling fresh air into the system, helping cool both the RTX 5070 and also the Fractal AIO, with the radio positioned at the top of the case. There's also another fan at the system's rear to ensure that air does flow correctly. Temperatures are good, but we'll talk more about those in just a moment with some benchmarks. Cables are neatly routed throughout the system on the side panel. This is easily removable with a couple of thumb screws to access the 3 intake fans if you need to clean them or for future upgrades to your rig. At the bottom of the case is the PSU, which is a Corsair 850 watt in this particular case, with a few spare cables tied down, and there's more in a goodie bag, which I'll talk about more in a moment. You can also easily slide off the top of the case with a few twists of 2 thumb screws. When you have both the side panels open and the top removed, you've got full access to all of the internals of the system. This means if you want to add an extra NVMe drive, upgrade to a future generation of GPUs, or do just about anything else such as clean the system, you're golden. And yes, there is a goodie bag that is provided by CyberPower Systems. This provides you all of the unneeded cooler mounts that would have come with your cooler. So for example, in this particular case, I was given AMD's cooling options. Despite the fact that I have an Intel CPU, there are also additional cables and other bits and pieces as well. For testing, I received a custom built system with the same packaging and retail experience as you as a customer would receive. DPD, which is their courier of choice within the United Kingdom, texted me the night prior with a delivery window, and of course, dutifully, this system was delivered to my house. You can see the unboxing experience on screen. The system arrived in a custom CyberPower PC box, and there's plenty of packaging, foam and protection to ensure that the courier doesn't damage it during transit. The system also comes with the standard foam for both the GPU and internal component protection. This of course again is just to make sure that stuff doesn't get jostled loose. Naturally, you will need to remove this, it's easy enough. And by the way, my cat Lucy, or one of my cats, also got very interested in the system at this point. Setting up the computer was simple and easy. Windows 11 comes pre-installed, although of course you can remove that and switch to Linux if you want. And this will be with the latest updates of the time they ship the system to you. The same thing could be said for drivers, and the system installation is pretty bare bones. There's no installation of trial antivirus or meme products to eat up a ton of system resources. Basically, it's a case of you get the Windows user account you need to set up, install Steam, and that's pretty much it. You're good to go.
For our benchmarking, we are going to be focusing primarily on games because I think that's what the majority of this audience are interested in. But we will also be throwing in some productivity benchmarks as well because honestly, I use productivity stuff all the time and well, I was quite curious. So yes, we're going to focus on 1440p and 4K. This is an RTX 5070 equipped system, excuse me. Now, I have done a full rundown of an RTX 5070 on the channel previously, so if you want more information on an RTX 5070 and my opinions of it, you can check that out. Honestly, I think it's absolutely fine for 1440p and makes a pretty good case for itself at 4K, but of course you would want to use something like DLSS. With that said, CyberPower obviously lets you change out the graphics card, so if you're not quite interested in the Nvidia line of cards, and of course you could go AMD, or you could go with something more with more grunt like an RTX 5080 or even a 5090. This CPU is more than capable of running a 5080 or a 5090, of course, and obviously that's down to you and your budget and what your desires are. And yeah, we will also be testing out Adobe Premiere and some other things as well. But because this system has a really fast drive, the Gen 4 Samsung 990 Pro, you're going to find most things load pretty snappily.
The RTX 5070 is fantastic for 1440p gaming, but can do a pretty damn good job at 4K as well, if you use DLSS from Nvidia and other tweak settings. I've got a full review of the Gigabyte RTX 5070 12GB on this channel, but of course the one inside the CyberPower system is one from MSI, but ultimately speaking they're going to fall within 1 or 2% of one another. If you do fancy more grunt, you can of course easily switch the card to a more powerful option, with AMD and Nvidia being offered by CyberPower systems, so you could go with, let's say, the RX 9070 XT, or even something beefier like the RTX 5080, or even like behemoth that is the 5090.
Alright, so now on to the SSD, which is one of the standout features of CyberPower systems. They are utilizing the Samsung Pro 2TB NVMe Gen 4 drive for this system, and they feature it in many of their pre-builts, but of course you can configure to different drives and larger capacities, but this is a 2TB model and it's super fast. So we're going to see some on-screen benchmarks, and then I'm going to give you a couple of real-world comparisons versus a 970 in one of my older rigs. Right, guys, so what I want to do is give you a little bit of a real-world comparison. Obviously, we've seen some productivity benchmarks. We've also seen various results from, you know, the likes of AS SSD and that type of thing. But what actually can this thing do when it comes to, for example, editing videos? This is a pretty extreme example. In Adobe Premiere here, I'm going to make sure I use the right mouse. You can see that we're using 4 different video tracks, and this is kind of various footage that I've recorded either using my camera. For example, there's me right there, and obviously there's various game overlays, and this is mostly 4K Nvidia shadow play footage, which is captured at high bit rate. So what I'm basically going to do, this is a 10900K on a Samsung 970 Evo. So this particular drive is, you know, a generation or 2 older now, but it was still pretty capable when it came out. Now, because the 10900K is limited to Gen 3 anyway, it's about the fastest thing that I could put in this system. And this is typically actually what I use for a lot of editing. I'm actually building another system for that on the meanwhile, but I want to give you guys a comparison actually to the 14900K and the Gen 4 990 drive right here. So what I'm going to do, we're going to do this very, 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 very scientifically. We're going to open up Task Manager, and here we're going to open up, make sure this is always on top. Is it? Yep, great. My favorite position for it. And so you can see here, this is a fresh reboot. So there's not much going on. Basically, whatever's in the system task at boot is what's going on. The preview window is 1/4. I'm going to put that to half. Actually, no, I'm going to keep it at 1/4 just for the sake of this, because we mostly want to focus on the SSD comparison. And what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm just going to start scrubbing through. So let's go to around 130. It took a few seconds, but it did get there. Well, that took a bit longer. So I'm going to go back to the beginning. And you can see here the disk. And it does hit the GPU usage as well. But what about if we start scrubbing through? You can see it's starting to really struggle. I'm going to hold shift so we're skipping forward faster. And we can see just how unsmooth this is. The SSD is starting to really hit. What I'm going to do is just start scrubbing through real fast. It's not going too bad, but it's certainly not the best when it comes to consistency. And that's the thing. Like, again, this is not the worst case scenario that you could possibly have. For video editing, I would consider this kind of a medium term thing. If you would have much higher bitrate files, it would get considerably worse, but it's not what you would consider a super smooth experience, and that is putting it mildly. Like, just clicking throughout the timeline, you can see here that there's some footage that's kind of missing, so it gets a bit smoother here because there's fewer video tracks. But as we start pushing through, we see that the read speed here is jumping up to over 500 megabytes a second just for a second there, like 100, drop back down. And now if we compare that to the other system, okay guys, so now we're going to run the same tests on the 14900K. Now obviously the 14900K is a lot juicier in terms of its CPU performance, and also it's got an RTX 5070. The amount of RAM is the same, by the way, it's 32 gigabytes, but obviously this is DDR5. But a big difference, of course, will be that Gen 4 drive, where the other one was just a 970 from Samsung. This is a 990. And what I'm going to do, so I have the same Task Manager up, although this is Windows 11, but we can't hold that against it. And I'm going to put the clip all the way at the beginning. Oh, just so you know, it is the same number of clips here. So we have, of course, 11 in the timeline, as you can see, sorry, 13 in the timeline, as you can see here. Some of them have audio, some of them I have deleted the audio. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of start at the beginning, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing. So I'm just going to hold the right arrow key for a little bit. And here, yeah, it's all pretty smooth. I'm just going to tap it for a few times as well, as you can see. Hold the shift, which skips forward a lot more frames, and yeah, a lot smoother. But this is the key. So I think I skipped to around 130. Someone will have to correct me in the comments, but I think it was around 130. And now you can see just how much faster this is, relatively speaking. But also, as I'm dragging around the project, it takes so much less time. And in fact, if we go crazy on this, you can see the transfer rate just absolutely skyrockets. And also, the GPU usage isn't too bad. We're hitting around 50%, which is a lot lower than what we were with the 3080, which is in the previous system. And if we go all the way here, where there's not many video tracks, obviously it gets a lot easier. But then we go all the way back to the beginning, and then we start scrolling as well, blah, blah, blah. It's just so much smoother. And the thing is, not only is this because, of course, the CPU, but also the SSD and everything else coming together. And it's really hard to explain on camera how much of a difference this really makes when you're doing video editing. I've actually seen us hit over a gigabyte per second of transfer on the SSD when I was using Adobe Premiere on this. And yeah, it's a really big deal, particularly when you start to apply different effects on high bitrate files. So if you're getting like really high quality raw files and that type of stuff, high resolution audio, it can make a massive difference on speed. And this was just something I threw together real fast. So you can imagine the difference it makes when you start putting in Adobe After Effects and all the other stuff that you might use. On camera, it's really difficult to explain just how much of a difference this really does make, because if you're doing a lot of editing and you're putting in cuts and stuff like that, it can make a huge difference. But also when the video files become much more complicated, believe me, like I've quite literally, like I was adding stuff in and I've literally seen over a gigabyte per second of data being pulled just on Adobe Premiere with several files when I was doing some testing. So it can be absolutely crazy. Now, also, I want to talk to you guys about temperatures for the system, because obviously that's a really big concern with a lot of pre-builds. What they will do is they won't particularly cable manage well, or they'll cheap out with air coolers and whatever else. But basically, I decided to test using a couple of different methods. The first would be games. So, for example, God of War and so on and so on. We took the temperatures, and you can see them on screen right now for the different benchmarks. And then also a worst case scenario, which would be Cinebench 2024. And obviously that one is going to be mostly hitting just the CPU. Meanwhile, the game benchmarks, yeah, they will hit the CPU a little bit, but they're also pulling a lot of wattage in from the GPU, which is, of course, in this particular case, an RTX 5070. I really want to stress that while this system does have really good cooling, obviously because you can customize different things and you could even have overclocks on your system if you so desire, you may want to play around a little bit depending. Now, there is a big question I'm sure many of you are asking: why would I buy a pre-built when I'm more of a hardcore gamer? And yes, it's true that a lot of my audience are much more into building their own system and testing it and tweaking it, and I 100% am with you there. However, I still think there are several cases where a pre-built is actually a really good idea. The first of which is that you found this video and you're not particularly hardcore into PC gaming, you're just getting your feet wet and you're just kind of like, you know what, I just want something to start. Or perhaps you're just running out of time, or maybe you're having a system built for your kids and whatever. And it can be quite nice in those cases. Also, sometimes pre-builts can be quite good in terms of price and value. I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but oftentimes, especially when there's weirdness going on in the supply chains, for example, when the whole mining boom happened and RTX, graphics cards just started to skyrocket in price and so on, pre-builds actually became a really good way of just getting a graphics card because availability was just so poor at the time. But outside of that, I also think that it's great if you are someone who perhaps just wants to help someone have a system that works, and this is particularly true if they are not actually within the same region as you. For example, let's say that you live, like I do, in London, and you're trying to help your friend Bob, who's in, I don't know, Scotland, or maybe across the pond, let's say they're in New York. It can be a little bit hard to be like, yeah, okay, I'm just going to ship you a new graphics card, or I'm just going to send you like these components over to start doing fault testing or what have you. It's just a lot easier to say, hey, you know what? CyberPower Systems, they have a full support line and they're just going to be able to help you, and there's just no stress. It's not your problem. It's their problem and they will resolve it. And that can be quite handy. Also, and honestly, I've dealt with this a lot. Especially when I was younger, I was basically ending up becoming the technical support for so many different people. And it was like, I remember the last straw, and this is actually a true story. I'm not kidding you guys. This was like when I was like, yeah, I'm down, I'm tapping, that's it, I'm done. I remember I helped a guy once with a system, and it wasn't like a big deal, but he's like a friend of a friend, basically. And so I was like, okay, cool. And then he asked my friend, could you get him back because my audio is not working? And I ran through a couple of technical support questions with the guy on the phone, and he was adamant that his audio was screwed. And I just like, you know what, fine. I went to his place and he swore he had tried everything. The speakers weren't plugged in. And I don't just mean to the back of the system, I mean they literally were not even plugged into the wall. And at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm done. I'm tapping. It's over. I need to change this. So at that point, I honestly, if someone's not like super technical, I know I sound kind of bad, but I do recommend they just buy a pre-built.
Now, the awesome thing about CyberPower systems is they have a wide range of pre-configured systems, laptops, desktops, and also workstations, but also you can go ahead and customize your build in a load of different ways. So for example, if we look under desktop, you could go to AMD Threadripper here, and we can see this behemoth, the Windows 11 Pro workstation built upon a Threadripper Pro 9985WX, and of course it has an Nvidia RTX Pro 5000 series Blackwell GPU and 128 gigabytes of memory, and that 4TB Samsung 990 Pro NVMe drive. On the other hand, you could look at games, and you can look at different GPUs, for example, so you could browse them under different GPU categories. Next day AMD PCs, next day Intel processors, and of course you can sort that by specific generations as well. So if we were to look under Intel Ultra systems, then of course they have a ton of different configuration options here for you to check out, including laptops and so on. But you can also, if you have a specific game that you play, let's say you're into esports, you can click on esports, and this gives you, systems that are basically just good to go for esports titles, and they come, of course, in different price ranges and different hardware configurations. But if you want to go absolutely balls to the wall and you know what you're doing, or maybe if you're helping your friend configure a system for you, then you can go ahead and take a look at the configuration options. So what I'm going to do is click on one of these systems here, and we can immediately start to customize it. So if we click on customize, you can do pretty much anything here. So you can look under the various CPU options, and you can change the CPU types if you don't need as much performance, or maybe you want to go to, let's say, the 14900KS, you can do that. You can change out the graphics card as well, so they've got a load of different GPU options. So in this case, let's say we don't need an RTX 5090 and you want to downgrade things to the 5080, which is still absolutely ridiculously fast, then you can do that. But what's also really cool is, while of course overclocking is certainly something that you can do at home, because naturally, because CyberPower systems use standard motherboards with BIOSes, and you can just go in and change things yourself. But if you don't want to worry about that, you can have an expert take over the overclocking for you. So for example, if we click here, you could have, let's say, a 10% overclock, or a 20% overclock, or a 30% overclock. You may need to change your cooling, of course. But even if you want some aesthetic customizations, you can go in and do things like laser engraving. You can start changing the coolant on your systems, have different colors. It's absolutely nuts, guys. And of course, this means that the system can be really your own. But critically, if you are helping a friend build that first system and there's something that just doesn't quite sit right with you, maybe your friend needs, extra storage space, or let's say in the future they're looking to upgrade their graphics card, you can maybe just make sure that they've got enough, power supply headroom, or change around the SSD configuration and so on.
Thanks very much to CyberPower Systems for sponsoring this showcase. You can learn much more about their custom PC builds and pre-built systems, as well as laptops and other stuff, by checking out the links in the video description. And also, thanks very much for watching the video. Take care of yourselves, guys. Bye for now.